You are listening to the Story On channel. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Supreme Magus. Chapter 0, Volume 2 Glossary. Author's note: this isn't a chapter. It's just a list of the characters in the Volume 2 in order of appearance, to help the readers remember who is who. Skip this if you have yet to read Volume 2 or if your memory doesn't need help. White Griffin Academy staff. Headmaster Linjos, the young headmaster of the White Griffin Academy, trying to reform the institution on behalf of the Queen. Professor Jien Trask holds the Theory of Combat Magic class, teaching the students the importance of first chore magic and how to use it to survive close encounters when fake magic is not available. Professor Valesar Nalia holds the Principles of Advanced Magic class, teaching the students a method exclusive to the 6 big academies on how to cast Tier 4 spells and above. Professor Vasta, professor in charge of the Healer Specialization class. Professor Duke Morth, head of the White Griffin Light Department. A brilliant mage and the only one capable to handling Manohar. Ditamartha's cameo. Professor Krishna Manohar, nicknamed the God of Healing, is a genius mage with a wild and temperamental attitude. Addicted's cameo. Professor Leica Wainmeyer, professor in charge of the Forge Master Specialization class. Professor Rugen Thorman, professor in charge of the Mage Knight Specialization class. White Griffin Academy relevant students. Uriel Dairis, son of Archmage Dairis, undertaking 2 specializations, Healer and Warden. Freya Sol Evo, daughter of Duchess Sol Evo, undertaking 2 specializations, Healer and Mage Knight. Quilla from Syria, an orphan from a backwater village, aiming to become a healer like Lith. Before coming to the academy, she suffered from a bad case of malnutrition. 6D BPF LH GDIHMKEHIDIBWD. Visander Bray, part of Lith's group during the mock exam. He is studying to become a warden. Milner Kratik, part of Lith's group during the mock exam. She is studying to become a war mage. Florianas, part of Lith's group during the mock exam. She is studying to become a mage knight. Belia Ulfa, part of Lith's group during the mock exam. She is studying to become a battle mage. Forest creatures. Scarlet, boss of the forest, is a giant powerful scorpicore that helps supervising the exams that take place in the wilderness. Scarlet's cameo. Emrook, ARY, loser-name cameo, a wolf-type magical beast. Scarlet second in command and leader of an elite squad. Centaur, a Kron, a hawk-type magical beast. Member of the elite squad under Emrook. Termin, a Singi, a boar-type magical beast. Member of the elite squad under Emrook. Supreme Magus. Chapter 0.1, Prologue. No matter if you are a pessimist or an optimist, Derek Esposito's life wasn't a good one nor a bad one. It was just a mediocre, insignificant existence. His father was a bipolar abusive man, capable of disappearing in his bedroom for days during the depressive phase. He would wake up only to eat, use the bathroom and the occasional "let's make your life miserable" fit of rage. During his euphoric phase, he would work like a madman, but not having any talent either as a businessman nor as social climber, he was unable to both being successful and establishing the right connections. In his natural state, whenever he decided to actually take his medications, he was just a coach potato that would stand up and go to work just to avoid the blame and spite from neighbors and peers. Whatever was his mental condition, he always was a perfect example of an abusive father. His sons were always a disgrace in his eyes. They never studied hard enough, never were disciplined enough, nor did show enough respect. And he was always there to remember them how wrong they were. He would yell at them for the slightest mistake, constantly reminding them that they were just parasites that leached off his hard work. And when words weren't enough or when they did fail to meet his expectation with school grades or chores, there was no teacher like his leather belt. Hence, Derek and Carl had to quickly learn how to fend off for themselves, since their absent-minded mother practically forgot about them right after giving birth, dedicating her life in pursuit of peace and quiet, staying as far as possible from her spouse. Tantrums. Derek was 2 years older, and desperately tried to take care of his little brother, but to no avail. They grew up watching and reading stories about heroes protecting the weak and upholding justice. But no hero ever appeared to save them. Every week they would be forced to go to church to worship a nondescript benevolent God and his son, the savior of all mankind. But no matter how much they prayed or how good they were, no miracle occurred. So, they simply stopped believing in heroes, and instead of wasting time with prayers they crammed. School was their only oasis, but that lasted only until the 6th grade. Once in middle school, it didn't even take a month before the bullying started. Their cheap clothes and gloomy disposition made them the easiest targets. They were so used being tossed around and insulted that they didn't even bother trying to fight back. For a long time, Derek had considered it the worst moment in his useless life. After a month, he knew he could not take any more of that, so he tried to make things better. He reported his father's abuses to the social services with an anonymous email, but being overworked and understaffed, the social work assistant made a brief visit and never came back. Then he tried to end the bullying by reporting their aggressors to a teacher, which in turn washed her hands by reporting it to the principal. The principal did not want to meddle with what he deemed as childish pranks, so he called Derek's parents to inform them of the problem, hoping they would let it slide. And at least his wish came true. Derek, instead, took an extra beating for not being man enough to face his own problems. Are you really that stupid to never learn anything from me? Never delegate. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Derek had never felt so helpless and desperate, so that night he bawled his eyes out, until he fell asleep. That had been the last straw. The next day he felt different, clear-headed like never before. It was not the time for despair anymore, he needed a plan. It would take him years to realize that something inside him had died. He was no longer able to trust, hope, or develop any sense of kinship. He was surrounded by enemies, and to survive Derek needed to be able to fight back. So, Derek asked his father to let him join a dojo and learn martial arts, and to his surprise he did not have to beg or even ask twice. His old man was glad that his wimpy and scrawny poor excuse of a child was finally interested in becoming a man. His only condition was that Derek was not allowed to quit for at least 1 year, otherwise he would have to pay for it. Not only Derek started practicing Aikido almost daily, he would also wake up 2 hours earlier every single day to build muscles doing push-ups, squats, sit-ups and running until he was out of breath. In a few months he was finally able to do every day 100 push-ups, sit-ups and squats and run for at least 10 kilometers before going to school. Aikido soon revealed to be a perfect choice for his situation. At low level was mainly focused on self-defense, but there plenty of space for attacking and fighting dirty. By practicing martial arts, he finally discovered something he was good at. He was not particularly nimble, nor a fast learner. His hand-to-eye coordination was also average at best. His talent lied in the ability to spot the best time to hit a sensible spot during a block or a defensive maneuver. Even when the sensei was teaching sword or tanto arts, Derek was always able to grasp the killing moves at his first try. Sometimes even before the sensei completed the practical demonstration. It was an exciting yet disappointing discovery since his only talent had no practical use. Even if Aikido was a sport with tournaments instead of a discipline, hits to groin, eyes and trachea were universally forbidden. For months Derek kept training hard while keeping a low profile at school, planning his next move. At the end of the first semester, Derek stopped hiding from the bullies and started replying in kind to every single insult they threw at him, using the best quick-witted roast lines he had found online. Derek paid attention to never go to the bathroom or to remain alone for too long, always keeping an adult witness in line of sight. It did not even take a full day before his enemies were fuming and outraged. Only when the veins almost popped out there necks, he threw his bait. I have enough of your *T as *holes. Meet me in an hour behind the grocery shop between Lincoln and the 3rd. Or are you too scared? Since you seek death, I will happily grant your wish, you fag *ot. It will only be you and the 3 of us, all right? Derek nodded without believing him in the least. And he was right. When they entered the back alley, they had brought along 2 more people. Derek was waiting for them, leaned against the wall at the end of the blind alley. There you are. I was starting to think you would stand me up. They started laughing. Sorry we were late. Hope you do not mind we taking some friends for the party. Derek shrugged, while grinning from ear to ear. No problem. No matter how much, worthless trash is always trash. I chose this alley because it's fully equipped with enough dumpsters to accommodate all of your friends. The last line hit a nerve, so they charged at him blindly. Gang up on him, guys. Do not let him escape. Let's how him who is the trash. And so, they fell into his trap. Derek had come here preparing the terrain, and choosing the best spot to fight. A blind alley to not make them escape, the end of the alley, so they would not notice the tripwire due to the dim light. The first two fell down hard on the concrete, and those behind them were so worried about not trampling on their friends that never saw the steel pipe coming. They did come in numbers. Derek had come fully armed. Using the pipe as a sword, he quickly hit them respectively on the head, the side of the knee, in the groin. Only then he started hitting the two that were trying to get back on their feet. While they were moaning and sobbing on the ground, he used a small knife to cut the tripwire, then he started beating them again and again with the metal pipe, giving a special attention to the nether regions. Deeply inside he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he could not care less. If the world was built to be unfair, the only possible course of action was to make it unfair at his advantage. So, he took out the taser that he borrowed from his father and tased them until unconscious. Then he stripped them completely and took multiple photos of each one of them, and even filmed them after arranging them so that they would seem to be spooning to each other. Then he splashed them with a bucket of cold water and sealed the deal. Sorry to ruin your Brokeback Mountain moment, girls, but I need your attention for a minute. When the bullies woke up, they were still in so much pain they could barely notice that they were naked and embracing each other. Retorting to Derek while he had still a firm grip on the steel pipe was out of question, so they kept quiet and listened. I have made quite a scrapbook of you, even a short movie, uploaded it on my computer and even into the cloud. And it would be terrible if someone, I do not know, like me, for example, would upload them on all the biggest image hosting sites. You know how they say, internet never forgets. The bully started crying and begging. Imagine how terrible would it be whenever someone would Google your names, be it your grandma, your girlfriends, or even the colleges you were willing to apply to, the first thing to appear would be those photos. Dude, no. Please, I do not even know you. I was just making a favor to a friend. It was only a joke, please forgive me. The choir of begging gave him the goosebumps. Derek wanted to puke at their hypocrisy. I do not care for your pathetic excuses. From this day onward, you will leave me alone. And you better pray that nothing happens to me, because the cloud is set so that if I do not enter the password every day, it will upload them everywhere. Without waiting for their reply, he turned back and walked away. Almost forgetting, I randomly threw your clothes in the dumpsters, can't remember which is which. If you don't want to go home in your birthday suit, you better start digging. So long, suckers. Derek returned home euphoric, almost singing. He had never felt so proud of himself and had the completely undeserved confidence that he would never think about those B*****stards ever again. Supreme Magus. Chapter 0.2, Prologue 2. The bullying ended, but his social life never stopped being miserable. How could he possibly make any friend with such a shameful private life? He had to constantly hide the bruises with long sleeves and had run out of plausible excuses for his streak of black eyes. Months before, his classmates and professors simply pretended to not know, and he just pretended to believe being that good of a liar. It was painful, but manageable. He still had his little brother to share that pain with. Carl was all he had, his family, friend and confidant. He was Derek's whole world, but when that age came, he started having crushes toward girls in his school, and those feelings weren't as easily suppressed. Once again, he felt utterly helpless. He could not tell anyone about his problems, could not allow people to get close to him, otherwise he would have to think of an explanation for not being allowed to bring any friend home, let alone a girl he liked. Derek was tormented by cruel thoughts, often demanding the heavens why what others took for granted was but an impossible dream for him. Fueled by the hormonal storms, Derek's rage started growing relentlessly. He started having trouble sleeping at night, thinking about all those lovey-dovey couples out there. Derek knew he was different from them. His crippling flaw wasn't being shy or having a bad case of acne. His problem couldn't be cured by any doctor, because it had a name and surname. Ezio Esposito, his trash bag of a father. Derek started conceiving plan after plan to get rid of him, even if that meant killing him. At night he would devise elaborate and meticulous plans that often involved prolonged torture, making Ezio suffer like Derek did for all those years. But when morning came, he would always realize it was a dumb plan. More wishful thinking than anything else, Derek lacked the means and the ruthlessness necessary for getting rid of Ezio. No matter how much he hated him, Ezio was still his father and he was just an angry teenager. Kill Ezio? Sure. And what about then? Live a whole life ridden with guilt? Running away from home to avoid being arrested? And with what money? Killing Ezio would have meant abandoning Carl forever and destroying any possible chance of being happy in the future. GGGG. So, every morning Derek would swallow his plan along with the porridge and move on. His only real prospect was to cram as a madman, get a scholarship and get out of that hell as fast as possible. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye it was the last summer before Derek's first year of high school. Despite the hot climate, his heart was cold as ice. Derek had already hit his growth spurt. That combined with his martial arts and muscle training had given him a mean look. Ezio was aware of that, and being a coward had started to avoid beating Derek as much as possible, making Carl the new favorite target. Derek had already tried standing up for his brother, but the only result had been Ezio buying a nightstick from the local army surplus and getting beaten with it instead, that with Ezio's bare hands. He saved Carl from that by begging and crying, and only because the ruckus had alarmed their neighbors. So, whenever Ezio threw one of his tantrums, Derek could only watch his brother getting beaten, again and again. Then, one morning Ezio received his first big commission in years. So, he wore his best suit despite the heat and had Derek preparing him the briefcase and the laptop. Ezio was in a real hurry. He could not afford his competitors to snatch this whale. It could have been his career-making commission. Derek rushed to the door, where Ezio was already waiting, and helped him adjust the laptop satchel. Ezio ran to the elevator, pushing the button like a madman, but the light remained red. Cursing his damn condo, the building manager and his rotten luck, Ezio made a rush to the stairs. And that's when Derek noticed it. Turning his head to follow his father, Derek noticed that the light made odd reflections on the hallway's floor. Ezio had just passed in front of him when he realized that the janitor had just washed the stairs but forgot to put the wet floor sign. It happened all in an instant. Ezio made a long heavy stride, all his weight down and forward, and then his foot slipped. Derek could have warned him, could have even extended an arm and prevented the fall. But instead he chose to remain still. Ezio tumbled down the stairs, bounced on the next alley and tumbled again, crashing downstairs. His body was a broken mess. All his limbs bent in unnatural angles. ATDKHD high THTHDHTTDTKLHTTTHTTHFLTD. As any teenager, Derek had his smartphone at hand, so he started to make several photos to prove that the floor was wet and there was no warning sign. His mind was already planning on hiring the best shark lawyer he could and sue the building managing firm responsible for his condo. Only then he carefully walked down the stairs to confirm Ezio's death. He was there, incapable of making a moan or asking for help, but his eyes were fixated on Derek, begging for help. Derek grinned to him and said, "Do you really think I am so stupid to never learn anything from you? As you more than once taught me, never delegate. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Your smartphone is in your pocket, take it out and call 911. I'm just a failure of a son, I do not want to mess this up for you, Daddy." Ezio's eyes were full of shock and hate, but that lasted only a moment. His head went limp, his gaze blank. A laughter fought to came out, but Derek suppressed it. Instead he started shouting for help, putting on his best terrorized son impression. As always, Derek's mother was too obsessed with her problems, her grief, her feelings to bother looking for the lawyer, leaving everything in Derek's hand, since Ezio was no more. 3 birds with 1 stone. After a careful research he contacted and hired the best shark lawyer they could afford, so that Derek would be his client instead of his mother. He told him everything about his father's incident, the abuse, and the need to make so that the money would be split between the 3 of them, mother and sons. Both Derek and Carl were very firm on that point. They wanted the lawyer to start the process to get emancipation. With the Money from the compensation and the inheritance, they had enough to be self-sufficient until Derek could provide for them. Both. What followed was the happiest period in their life. First, they obtained the inheritance, and shortly after they got emancipated and moved away from their mother's place. Not even a month later, they received a very generous settling offer from the building manager. They used it to settle up and make proper plans for the future. During the following years, bullies were not a problem. Derek and Carl were now both martial artists and had each other's back. Finally, they could experience having friends and girlfriends, their domestic nightmare finally over. They suffered many disappointments though, since too many of those so-called friends turned out to be people that wanted to use their parent-free house as a party house. Also, they had a hard time figuring what being a normal teen was supposed to be, while their peers seemed only interested in having fun and skipping classes. They were focused on studying and saving as much as possible. Derek and Carl would spend holidays and vacations doing part-time jobs to slow down the thinning of their bank account. They were not poor, but not rich either. They knew they had to save as much as possible, in case rainy days would once more fall upon them. But all in all, they had a good life. Derek got a scholarship and obtained a bachelor degree in chemistry, soon followed by a master in biochemistry. Carl was doing well too, already got his engineering degree, ready to study for his master, and already had a fiancée. Despite being really happy for his little brother, that was really a painful thorn in Derek's side. He had always been the more socially inept between the two, and never managed to get into a stable relationship, not even in college. Derek had no problem talking to girls, the problem always lied in him being picky and ended in his inability to trust. He had many crushes, but never fell in love. At the beginning he put the blame on his bad luck, always finding shallow or idiotic girls. After finding more than one good girl, he put the blame on his dark past. But when confronted with Carl's happy relationship, he could only blame himself. While Carl had suffered almost the same things, he got out much stronger and pure than Derek. Derek was just too scared of being hurt again to let any relationship grow above a certain level, and that was an enemy that he could not just beat up. Derek accepted the first decent paid job he got, working in the night shift of a big chemical company in the Q&A department. Carl had shared with him, as a graduation present, that he was willing to propose to his fiancée as soon as he got his master. Hence Derek needed money because he had only 2 years to save enough to give his little brother a decent wedding. Derek did not like his current job, but it was a way to start his working career and filling his curriculum. Also, it was well paid. And he resolved to use the company insurance to seek for psychological counseling. He knew he had problems and wanted to work them out. Derek consulted several doctors before finding someone he was able to work with, and after several months he felt he was finally starting to make some progress. But alas, such happiness was not bound to last. Supreme Magus. Chapter 0.3, Prologue 3. It was a Friday evening, and Derek was getting prepared for work. He was still stuck doing Q&A because the pay was too good, and no matter how many times Carl said he wanted a small ceremony, Derek was sure that whatever they planned to spend, it would at least double in the end. It was a goddamn wedding, hence things were supposed to blow off proportions at some point. That's just how they work. Derek was adjusting his shirt when the smartphone rang on the notes of Night on Bald Mountain, the preset ringtone for unknown numbers. Derek Esposito, who is it? Mr. Esposito, this is the St. Joseph Hospital. The female voice sounded worried. This, together with the word hospital, sent him a shiver down his spine. Is Carl Esposito your brother? Derek could almost hear her biting her nails. Yes, what happened? He was involved in a car accident and is in serious conditions. You should come here as soon as possible. The doctors need you. Since you are his healthcare proxy and the patient in unconscious. A car accident? Derek yelled while rushing out of the door and looking for a cab. We don't have any in car. What the hell happened? I'm sorry, I am not at liberty to say. The doctors will explain it. Derek hung up on her. He had no time for useless babbling. Only for a goddamn cab. Every second in the traffic was torture, and when he finally arrived it was too late. The surgeon and a police officer explained to him that Carl had been run over by a drunk driver. The culprit had run off and the Police was still looking for him. A bystander had immediately called 911, but because of the traffic jam caused by the accident, it took hours for the ambulance to arrive. So, when Carl arrived at the hospital, he was already in critical conditions. He had multiple fractures, ruptured spleen and internal bleeding, requiring immediate surgery. Derek had been called while Carl was just entering the OR. They had done their best to save him, but Carl had lost too much blood, so there was nothing they could do. They offered Derek their condolences, but all he could hear was white noise. "Let me see my brother," he begged. The body was covered by a sheet, only the head visible. Derek could still see traces of blood on the face of his little brother. Derek left his number to the police officer to be kept updated about the investigations, and then returned home. The culprit was quickly apprehended thanks to the traffic cameras. It turned out to be a kid, barely 17 years old, that had stolen his old man's car and then got drunk and high with his friends. Derek lived the months before the trial in anguish. The damned DA had decided to prosecute him as a minor, and the even more damned judge had granted him house arrests. All while his little brother, his Carl, was dead because of him. How could they do such a thing? Derek would yell and argue with anyone willing to listen to him. Why all this talking about the rights and the future of that little *T? What about my brother's rights? What about his future? Carl has none because of him. What kind of justice is that? Derek visited multiple times the DA office, expressing his outrage and demanding them to ask for the maximum sentence. They were always kind and accommodating, and promised him that they would not forget about Carl. When the day of the trial finally came, Derek's world died one more time. The DA and the defense attorney had come to a settlement. Since Chris Wainwright, this was the name of the murderer, was still a minor and that was also his first offense, he had accepted to go in rehab and do 600 hours of community service. If Chris would complete his rehab program and did not commit crimes in the next 3 years, then he would be a free citizen with no criminal record. Derek was too dumbfounded to even be angry. When the session was over, he just walked to the DA and asked a single question with muffled voice. Why? And then with their most kind and accommodating tone, the DA assistants explained to Derek that Chris was just a kid from a good family that had made a dumb mistake. He had a brilliant future ahead. Chris had already been admitted at the Caltech and this was his first offense. Also, his parents had hired a great lawyer and the judge would likely be unwilling to destroy Chris' life. Despite their expectations, Derek did not make a scene. Derek's fire was extinguished, he had no more tears to shed. In the following days, Derek lived by going through the motions. He kept following his routine like nothing had happened, his brain still refusing everything that happened in the last half year. The only thing that made him feel alive was that constant headache that had started shortly after Carl's death. According to his doctor, it was a stress-related symptom, so with all that had happened, Derek had just been swallowing aspirins and paracetamol like they were candies. But the pain never did go away, instead it was getting worse. Derek finally found the strength to get a serious checkup, and once again bad news were waiting for him. According to the full body scan and the follow-up biopsy, he had stage 2 pulmonary cancer. But I never smoked in my whole life, Derek exclaimed, more amused than scared. Indeed, it's odd. Dr. Monroe, his oncologist, was quite puzzled. She was a good-looking Hispanic woman, maybe 5 years older than Derek. In another moment he would have probably asked her out. You told me you work for a chemical company, right? Derek nodded. Such an aggressive cancer is too uncommon to be a coincidence. My personal opinion is that their ventilation system failed. You and God knows how many more people have been breathing poison from quite some time. But we wear masks the whole time we work with the chemicals, and speaking for myself, I follow the safety protocols to the letter. My colleagues always mock me for it. Derek was still in disbelief. Then maybe the masks are cheap pieces of junk. Or maybe the lab or the storage, if not both, have leaks. These corporate scumbags only seek profits. It would not surprise me in the least if they cut from the safety budget to put more dividends in their pockets. Dr. Monroe was too outraged. Even in his catatonic state, Derek could tell there was more to it. Doctor, what are you hiding from me? He asked, looking her straight in the eyes for the first time. She nibbled on her lower lip for a while before answering. Between you and me, you are not the first case from your company. I have already reported it to the Department of Health and to the federals. If I were in your shoes, I would get a good lawyer and sue the soul out of them. You'll need a lot of money for the treatments. I agree on the lawyer, but I refuse any treatment. I'll just take palliative care. Dr. Monroe jumped from her chair. Do you realize that without the proper treatments you have 6 months, a year at best to live? Also, as I have already said, your cancer is really aggressive. We need to start as soon as possible if we want a chance to beat it. The situation was dramatic, but Derek found all those words hilarious, so he could not refrain from chuckling. We barely know each other, Doctor. So, we have nothing to do if not going separate ways. Derek said to her with an icy tone. What do I have to live for? I have no family, no loved ones. My little brother's ashes are all that is left to keep me company. I could die tomorrow and I would not give T. They parted on bad terms, but she still gave him her number, in case he changed his mind or simply needed to talk. Derek called his old shark lawyer and explained everything. Years had passed but they would still send each other Christmas cards. Derek had kept tabs on him, just in case. He had now more grey hair than before but was still a first-class shark. Derek stopped going to work and started spending his money without much care. He would go to all the fancy restaurants he had always wanted to try, bought the suits he always dreamed about and only ate his favorite foods for breakfast, lunch and dinner. Derek would spend most of his days playing games on his brand new gaming PC and revisiting all the spots that held a significance for him and Carl. Then, 24 days after the diagnosis, he had an epiphany. Supreme Magus. Chapter 0.4, Prologue 4 Fall and Ascension. It was a night like all the others since he had quit his job. Derek would wear one of his new suits and wander off the city to see what would it kill him first, the cancer or a random crazy head. Once reached exhaustion or simply boredom, he would then take a cab and get back home. Derek was walking with quick strides, high on his medications when he saw him. Chris Wainwright. He was holding a bottle of liquor, ill-hidden inside a paper bag, from which he would drink in big gulps. Chris was talking and laughing loudly with a teen girl that was showing a lot of skin. She was holding a joint, taking big puffs. Until they traded and got into a car. It was a custom-painted muscle car. Not the same Camaro that Chris had used to kill Carl, it was even bigger and more expensive. In that moment, Derek wanted to puke blood. How could he possibly have forgotten about that little B****? Had his cancer really screwed up his brain so bad to be willing to let such a loose end slip? The tires screeched and the car started suddenly, almost running over a woman that was crossing the road. The skimpily dressed girl rolled down the window, yelling insults at the woman that was still frozen in fear. Derek could almost hear that couple of idiots laughing. Gritting his teeth, he called a cab and started to plan his final act. First, he started to stalk Chris on all the social networks, learning all his routines and habits. Then Derek began to follow him and planted a GPS tracker under the Camaro to always know his exact location. Simply skimming through Chris' chirper, he found at least 50 violations of the parole deal. While following him, Derek took many photos of Chris abusing alcohol and drugs, but Derek had no intention to submit the evidence to the police. What could he possibly gain from that? Chris would just get another slap on the wrist and then start being more careful. Derek had not the luxury of time, nor the willingness of doing what the so-called justice system was supposed to. Less than a week later, by checking Chris' Bookface page, Derek learnt of a rave he would participate to. Derek double-checked his equipment and jumped into his new car, a black 1967 Chevrolet Impala, the best car to hunt monsters with. The rave was a secret, hence it would take place in some rundown abandoned location. Derek followed Chris closely, and as soon they were away from traffic cams he ran into the Camaro from the side, forcing Chris to halt. As soon as Chris stepped down of the car, Derek took him down with a stun gun, and then quickly proceeded to check if the Camaro had more passengers. It seemed to be his lucky night. Chris was driving alone. Derek searched him and crushed every electronic device he could find. Bitfit, smartphone, even Chris keychain. Derek tied him hands and feet and ball gagged him. Then he destroyed his own smartphone and the GPS tracker, tossing everything outside the road. Then he moved Chris in the trunk of the Impala, headed toward a party only for the two of them. Derek drove to an abandoned warehouse in the old industrial area. He had already got rid of the lock and chain that kept the big metallic doors closed, replacing them with his own. Inside the warehouse there were only 2 chairs, both bolted to the ground, a bucket and several water tanks. Derek opened the trunk, discovering that Chris had regained his senses, so he tasked him again. Then he took Chris to a chair and started tightly binding his arms and legs to it. Then Derek splashed him with a bucket of water, forcing him to regain focus. "Hello, Chris. My name is Derek Esposito, and you killed my brother. We need to talk." Chris tried getting out of the restraints, and while commending his efforts, Derek violently hit him in the groin with a nightstick. The pain paralyzed him. "Where was I?" "Oh, yes. The last time we saw each other was during your fast trial. Do you remember me?" Chris, panting, intensified. "Good. Let's get straight to business." Derek took 2 digital timers out of the car, setting the first to 30 minutes and the second to 2 hours, 44 minutes and 16 seconds. Then, he pulled out a gun and double-tapped Chris' liver. His scream was muffled by the gag ball, but the shots echoed loudly. In the empty warehouse, Derek started both timers simultaneously and came in close, checking the blood. It was dense and black, a clear indicator of a crushed liver. "Now, before the real pain settles in, I need you to take a good look to the timers, they are really important." Chris was crying and screaming, so Derek had to splash him again and pull him by hair to get his attention. "The first timer marks how much time you have left. After it rings, even if someone should miraculously break through that door and rescue you, you would be dead anyway. You have only so much time until your system gets flooded by toxins and filtered by the liver, to the point that no transplant can save you. The second timer is a surprise. We'll get to it in time. For now, your only task is to stay awake and savor every moment of pain, like Carl did." The time flew. Chris kept screaming through the gag ball, and soon the fist timer rang. Chris started sobbing even stronger, sometimes stopping only because overwhelmed by the constantly rising pain. Derek would speak to him no longer, he would just pace back and forth, occasionally checking the second timer. Every time Chris fainted, Derek would splash him and force him to stay awake before refilling the bucket. When the second timer rang, Derek finally spoke again. "I have bad news and I have good news. The bad news is that I lied before. I thoroughly researched liver injuries, and with such crushed liver you had no hope to begin with. Even if I had shot you in front of the best hospital in the USA, unless they had a compatible liver at hand, you would have died. I wanted to give you false hope, as happened to my brother while waiting for help. The good news is that you just suffered as long as Carl did. I may be many things, unrelenting, vengeful, a liar, a murderer. But I am also fair. So your suffering ends now." Derek pointed the gun to Chris' head and double-tapped him. Then he pointed it to his own head. "Little brother, I'm coming. Wait for me." And pulled the trigger one last time. While Derek's body was still falling, his consciousness was bathed in light and he felt pulled toward the sky. After months of grieving, a whole lifetime of misery and pain, Derek felt that all his traumas and hatred were fading away. Derek had never experienced such bliss. In this new form he felt no negative emotion, he was in peace with his past, unafraid of his future. Derek was enjoying a present that he felt could lead to endless possibilities, and there was no right and wrong, success or failure. He would simply be, no strings attached. That intoxicating feeling lasted until he suddenly woke up, alive and breathing. All his negative emotions returned, plunging him back into despair. Derek cursed inwardly while trying to focus his eyes. Maybe it was because of the shot to the head, but his vision was blurry. So much for the perfect plan. Some idiot must have rescued me and somehow I survived the journey to the hospital. I am still alive. I still have cancer. I am still alone. But when his eyes finally cleared up, they strongly disagreed with his reasoning. DKIKDFHTLIDDBDDBDILEDDBDITBITHLL. Derek was in some kind of huge metal corridor surrounded by dead bodies. Alien dead bodies, to be precise. They were all wearing some kind of full-body armor that resembled some kind of sci-fi space suit. Where the F***K am I? What the hell does this mean? He screamed while trying to get up, only to fall back on the floor. He fell hand first, and only then he noticed that he was wearing a spacesuit too, and that his hands, all 4 of them, had 3 fingers each. What the actual F***K? Supreme Magus. Chapter 0.5, Prologue 5, Collateral Damage. After much screaming and freaking out, Derek finally regained his composure and started to analyze his current predicament. The first thing that caught his eye was a huge hole in the spacesuit at the chest level. The contours of the hole had burn marks all over it, and there was a lot of purple jelly on both his suit and the dead bodies. That meant the purple jelly was coagulated alien blood. Derek turned his head to see the spot where he had woken up, noticing a lot of blood and even something that he found safe to assume was some kind of splattered viscera. This makes no sense, he thought. All the evidence points to the fact that this body was dead as Julius Caesar until I somehow happened to inhabit it. And for whatever reason, it's also fully healed. Oh man, this means all religions are dead. Wrong. Luckily I never believed in any mumbo-jumbo, otherwise I would be really disappointed right now. Derek then proceeded examining his new body. It had 4 arms, only 2 legs, but all the limbs were long and skinny. The legs were reverse-jointed, like those of a cat. Both hands and feet had only 3 fingers each. Derek was really curious about his facial features, but there was no reflective surface in sight. So, he tried feeling his face with the fingers, but the suit turned out to come with a helmet, which did not impede his senses though. The only thing he could establish was the shape of the helmet, and based on it Derek's new head should have been something similar to a shark's dorsal fin. Then he tried to speak. Test, test. Derek Esposito. 1, 2, 3. He could somehow do it, but it was still English. That meant that he did not inherit neither the muscle memory nor the intellect from the body's previous owner. Derek tried getting up, but the center of gravity was too different from his old body, so he had to give up and proceed crawling like a baby. So, he started examining the corpses to make heads or tails of what was happening around him. Judging from the suits, there were 2 factions at war. One had a red-colored spacesuit, and the other, which Derek was donning, was gray. He had no idea which side was winning. But it would not make any difference to him anyway. Unless the suit was equipped with a universal translator, he was incapable of communicating. Enemies would kill him on sight. Allies would probably ditch him like garbage. Who would ever want a rambling idiot, incapable even of walking during a life-or-death situation? I'm not even here from a day. GGG. And I am already as good as dead. Refusing to give up, Derek managed to get up by leaning on the walls and started exploring. The corridor had many doors, yet his choices were painfully limited, since he could only go through the open ones. Derek had no idea how to open the doors nor how to operate the control panels that he found along the way. He tried pushing buttons at random but nothing happened. And he was starting to get hungry. Will I die like this? Starving in a goddamned spaceship, alien planet, or whatever the F***K is this? I don't know what this useless pile of flesh eats. Even if I stumble on a mountain of food, I have no way to know what is what. And even if I did, I do not know how the heck to remove this helmet. After walking for several hours, hunger and frustration drove him to hysteria. Derek screamed and kicked whatever was within reach, until exhaustion made him fall asleep. When he woke up, his mind was clear again. This is a nightmare. I am all out of options, to the point that even if I wanted to kill myself, I would not know how. He banged the back of his head against the wall to keep frustration at bay. I never thought about this, but being reborn in a sci-fi environment is truly the worst-case scenario. Alien body, alien customs. Complete lack of the new species' common sense. And to make things worse, everything here is so high-tech that I cannot even operate a door. Heck, every goddamn button could be tagged and it would still be useless to me since I don't know their language. His hunger was rising and he was feeling weaker by the hour. Having no time to lose, he started wandering again, this time banging and screaming at every door he met, trying to draw some attention. Derek was on the verge of fainting again due to hunger and exhaustion when finally a door opened up. The shock was great enough for him to lose his grip and fall to the ground. On the other side there were gray-suited aliens in a wedge formation. Every one of them was holding some kind of long metal staff as it was a rifle. Derek didn't even attempt to get up, he just waved a right hand, hoping it was a peace sign. Captain. That's Zarake. His life signal getting back online wasn't a glitch in the system, he is still alive. From this point onward means words that Derek does not understand. The formation opened and a taller and bulkier alien closed in. The soldiers never lowered their weapons nor lost focus, waiting for the attack order. What are you doing on the floor, soldier? And how in Thrak's name did you survive that ambush? The captain asked with a coarse voice. Dude, I have no idea what you did just said. What is he rambling? Medic, any reading on that blaster wound? A purple-dressed alien walked forward while scanning Derek's body. None, sir. It's not any dialect in the Empire. And the scanner confirms that the hole in his armor is definitely from a Corellan blaster. I have no idea how he survived it unscathed. It's a miracle. It's a liability. The captain's tone was grim. He took a staff from a soldier's hands and by pushing a button it became a glaive, whose blade was made of pure energy. Well, seems that I'm going to die from a lightsaber. It's cool, one hit and I'll be turned into dandruff. Lucky me, another painless death incoming. When the captain plunged the glaive into his chest, it did not make any burning sound. It pierced him from side to side, bleeding him to death. The blade was not a laser-based weapon, but a hard light construct, making it no different from an ordinary glaive. Listen up, soldiers. Zarake was a good soldier and we will remember and mourn him as such. When and if we get out of this alive. But that thing, whatever that is a risk we cannot allow to take. Not with Prince Rekhart in our care and those Corellan rebel scum still at large. Better some collateral damage than a spy among our ranks. Now shut that door and check the perimeter again. This time, death was far from painless for Derek. He felt like his chest was on fire, but what really hurt wasn't the wound as much the lungs. Derek was struggling to breathe. Every breath was shallower and more difficult than the last. Blood started gurgling from his mouth, and he felt like slowly drowning. His throat kept contacting trying to draw in air, but to no avail. It took Derek less than a minute to die, but for him it seemed to last forever. Once again, he found himself basked by blinding light and pulled towards it. Just like the last time, he felt all his worries and rage fading, but instead of enjoying the feeling he was simply annoyed. Derek had never believed in any god, hence he never believed in heaven or hell. Humankind has always been a terrible race, he thought. It's impossible to define someone as truly bad. Most of the times the bad guys are simply people who never got a chance to be anything but criminals. Then there are people, like me, whom life had pushed and pushed until they broke. Not to mention psycho and sociopaths. How could someone that is born bad be sent to hell simply because his head is malfunctioning? Hence, I have always believed that either there was an afterlife for everyone, or no afterlife at all. Death is supposed to be final spirit level, good or bad, rich or poor, the destination has to be the same. Instead I got this cheap excuse of reincarnation screwing with me. What purpose being reborn could possibly have if I retain all of my memories? Whatever body or planet I would end up in, I would still carry my baggage, so once outside the light all my pain, rage and contempt toward humankind would prevent me to learn whatever lesson I am supposed to learn. Inside that otherworldly space, he had the clarity to see that his psychologist was only half right. He could only change if he wanted to, but because of all his past experiences he had no will to. It was a perfect example of a catch-22 paradox. Suddenly, he was pulled downwards and away from the light. His vision was a blur, but he could still hear a lot of commotion around him. Giant hands were holding him still while he was puking God knows what, and judging from the breeze on his butt cheeks he was naked. I don't know what the heck is going on, he thought, but I bet I am in deep *T again. When Derek was finally able to see again, he discovered that the hands were not gigantic, the issue was him being very small. A baby, to be precise. He is alive. I did it. I managed to save your boy's life. A further inspection revealed that said hands belonged to some gibberish rambling old hag. Derek was currently inside a wooden shack, surrounded by people dressed with rags that could be called clothes only if they were part of a 1000 AD themed Renaissance fair. Man, I hate being always right.